Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in this video I'm really excited to share a few archaeological sites we're going to visit. They're very close to each other and they're connected to each other, and yet they couldn't be more different. In this video we are going to be visiting the Baker Archaeological site in Baker, Nevada, well, just outside of Baker, Nevada, which is a Fremont site, and then we are going to go up on the hill to visit some caves that are where the people of this village would go up into the mountains to hunt. They would hunt for bighorn sheep and deer and harvest a bunch of different plants and then would go back down. There's some beautiful petroglyphs of this site. Now the Baker Archaeological site itself is quite boring on ground level. So we're going to get some good drone shots, and I've even taken the archaeological papers and translated them into a three-dimensional painting that I did to actually show what this village looked like. This is a very important site, even though the first site we're visiting on ground level looks quite boring. It's very significant. We're going to visit most of these sites, but first of all, we've got to talk about who these people are. Who are the Fremont people? The Fremont people basically lived in Utah, as far as the sites that have been uncovered. Now, the Fremont people were from about 1 AD to about 1300 AD. Now, these are contemporaries to and neighbors to the ancestral Puebloan people. Now, we used to call the ancestral Puebloan people the Anasazi, which is like Anasha. It's a Navajo word, a Dene word, which kind of means like ancient enemies. Well, it turns out it's 2025 right now, the definition of who are the ancestral Puebloan people and who are the Anasazi are separate. So basically the ancestral Puebloan people, good folk living in the south in the Four Corners region, and neighbors to, up to the north, the Fremont people. These people were distinctly different, but they shared technology. They shared a trade of goods and corn and turkeys, which all were coming up out of Mexico. But the Fremont people basically were mostly consolidated into the area of what is today modern Utah, barely pushing out on the edges. The Baker Nevada site is just a few miles into Nevada, and it represents kind of the far western edge. As far as we know, we've never found anything further west. It is the farthest, most westernly edge of the Fremont Range. And it's a very unusual site because the Fremont people are well known for their pit houses. It used to be everybody lived in some sort of earthenwork pit house in the southwest, but around 300 BC, the ancestral Puebloan people began to switch from pit houses to adobe. The Fremonts didn't. The Fremonts stuck with pit houses. So what is a pit house? A pit house, when you walk up to it, it's mostly below ground. So it might be a little bit of a mound that you're coming up to, and there's a ladder. You go down inside, and then inside there's 4 posts that hold it up. And if you look at the LiDAR scan, you can kind of get a sense of what this looked like. There were big ones, there were small ones, but these were pretty standard for the Fremont people. Fremonts did not do a lot with adobe. They did not do a lot with masonry. They mostly just did these pit houses. Well, this is what is very strange and unusual about this particular site. At the Baker Nevada site, there are for Fremont people, enormous adobe structures. Now, the sad thing is, this site there's not much left. There's foundations. It was excavated from like 1991 to 1994. Artifacts were taken and are now housed in museum collections for researchers to have access to, and papers were written up on it, and the site was basically buried up. Now, in the past, when I have visited this site and when other people have visited the site, the foundations of these structures were pretty well preserved, and the Park Services has made a nice pavilion and kind of like an interpretive trail. It's kind of sad going there this time. Cattle have been allowed to go through and are trampling down what's left. So after all this, to make this an archaeological site, it's kind of sad, and it really does need better preservation. But this site is so important to understanding the history of the Southwest, and especially the western part of the Southwest. Because again, This site is unlike any other Fremont site because of these adobe structures. And so I want to visit this site with you, share it with you, and help you understand and interpret it better, both through on the ground, boots on the ground kind of interpretation, as well as showing this painting I did, helping you better understand the archaeological dig that took place there. But then I want you to understand why on earth they lived in such a desolate place, because it wasn't desolate back then. And we're going to go up to the mountains again where these people were hunting and visit the cave site and see these incredible Fremont petroglyphs. So let's go ahead and invite you to take this journey with me, and we are going to head out to the Baker Nevada Archeological site. Zooming in on Google Earth, we have a great opportunity to see this site from satellite. And from above, even from satellite, you can see these ruins. Even though there's not much left on the ground, they're clearly viewable from space. But you can see this is a stark landscape. There's nothing alive there. But just to the left there, you can see the dry river. This river flowed freely 700 years ago, and it fueled not only the Fremont's personal water needs, but it also gave them the ability to irrigate. In the distance, you can see that peak. That is Wheeler Peak. Wheeler Peak is the biggest peak in all of Nevada and has water year-round that flows down to the valley and used to flow on this river to the Fremont village. Now, we're going to visit this site here in a little bit. We're going to visit the caves that the Fremonts went up to. So our film crew got together and we crossed the severe desert. It's a long and brutal desert. It's very bright. It's very hot to make it out to this Baker Nevada site. Now, please stay with me until we make it to the caves. This site, it might seem boring. We're going to do good interpretation and help you understand this site a little bit better so that you can appreciate it. But be sure to stay and watch until the end when we go and see the caves up above in the mountains and the petroglyphs there.
So this site is so desolate. There's literally nothing out here. It's not even sagebrush. And that's a fascinating thing. And we're going to take a look at this and see why that is. Why would anybody actually live here when there's no life? This site is incredible. And it is the starkest site on Earth. And I'm going to wear my sunglasses because all of this sediment here, this used to be Lake Bonneville. It's a giant lake. We had water 1,000 feet above us. But about 12,000 years ago, Lake Bonneville emptied out, and you have all this silt and this stuff. This is as dusty and as reflective as can be, and this will blind you. If you go walking around in this desert with your sunglasses off, you're gonna blind yourself over time. But this is all lake sediment. Now, the area we're at right now is so stark and so lifeless. There's not even sagebrush. There's just little clumps of rabbit brush here and there. There's nothing. There's nothing to eat. There's nothing to hunt. So why on earth would anybody live here? Especially when, if you look behind me, we have the tallest mountain in all of Nevada, Wheeler Peak, which we're gonna go check this out here in just a minute. Wheeler Peak is alpine. We're gonna go up 10,000 feet. Wheeler Peak gets the top, it's about 12,000 feet in elevation. It's enormous. And there's pine trees, there's aspen trees, there's flowing water. And if you look down below, even in the foothills there, you can see there's a lot of trees. And we're gonna go up and visit that in a few minutes. But those trees, that's what was here. 700 years ago, that's what was at this site. And there was a river just a little ways off that is also dried out and not in existence anymore. So the earth has changed so much in just the past 700 years that this place is entirely uninhabitable now. But at the time, this community was thriving. There was likely a few hundred people living here. Now, this site is a Fremont site. The Fremont people were people who were hunter-gatherers, very well known from about AD 1 to about AD 1300. And right here was kind of at the tail end of that route, just the last end of that period is when we had the Fremont people living here. But what's very strange about this site, normally Fremont lived in just pit houses. Pit house is a very simple structure. Show you a little clip of what they look like. Pit houses, they're cut and dry. They're easy because when you're done with them, you can go to a new area and make a new one once you've tapped out any of the resources in an area. But this particular landscape was huge. There were tons of pit houses, there were tons of adobe granaries, and we're standing right next to, we're gonna check out first, a type of great house that was this big giant square, and it was made out of adobe, and it was enormous for the Fremont people. We haven't seen anything like this anywhere else in Fremont society ever. And it's almost reminiscent of Puebloan people. We know the ancestral Puebloan people and the Fremont people were contemporaries. We know they traded ideas, they traded goods, but they were distinctly different. So it's interesting to see more of Puebloan style of a structure at a Fremont site. But we're going to take a look at this. And again, the important thing to remember is that just right up here behind us, that so close, just a few miles away, would be a lush place to live now. And over the past 700 years, this landscape has changed that much that now this place is entirely desolate and nobody would ever think to live in this spot.
Flying the drone over this site again, it's stunning to think that in 700 years ago, this once flowing river is now nothing but a dry riverbed. This would have been lined with aspen trees and pinyon pines with pine nuts and animals and people going all along this river. The laughter and voices of people are now just echoes of the past. But as we go over to the actual village site, from above, we're grateful to be able to have a drone because it gives you a much better look at what this site really is. Now, all around the edge, you see those round dots. Those are also pit houses that have been excavated and refilled in by the archaeologists. I did this painting so you can get an idea of what the site actually looked like when people were living here.
We're going to start with this room here. This is what this site is most known for. This is kind of a great house that breaks all the rules of Fremont culture. This is about 25, 30 feet by 30 feet, and there's not much left. Now, this was excavated in the 90s, I think 91 to 95. This has been excavated and reburied to preserve all the excavation. They took all the information down, but they left the little bit of adobe structure around the edge. Since I was here last time, it's actually sad. Cattle are coming through here and knocking it down. It's really kind of sad that this site isn't preserved that well because of this. But this particular room, this is unlike any other Fremont site. Fremont's normally, again, built in pit houses. This is unusual. This had a frame around the outside edge of poles of pinyon pines and lodgepole pines harvested from up there on the mountain, but then it had adobe walls all around the outside and a flat roof that you could walk on top of and a door right over there. There's nothing like this anywhere else in any other Fremont site. And again, this particular site, this particular room is far more reminiscent of ancestral Puebloan sites that you find in kind of red rock country, and it's more of what you would expect to see. So we don't know what the meaning or purpose of this room was, but for the Fremont realm, this room was enormous. This was special, and it's one of the things that stands out about this site. So even at a site that has already been excavated, there's still artifacts lying around. This is a lithic. This is quartzite. Quartzite is knappable. It can be made into arrowheads or stone knives. I'm a flint knapper, so I can read how this was knapped. And this is a spall, and it was spalled out this direction. But you can see the blade on it. So this is debutage. This is waste material where they were knapping down to get to a core to make into something specific. But this is just sitting out here on the surface. So even at an excavated site, you still find things like this on the surface. This over here is a type of granary. And again, this is very unusual. There's many of these at this site where they have two sections, two rooms, two distinct rooms. This is, again, not normal in the Fremont culture. Normally for the Fremonts, a granary is pretty rudimentary and it's up in cliffs. What this reminds me very much so is of a site in southern Utah that we call the Dollhouse Ruins. The dollhouses are two rooms about the same exact size that are entirely made out of stone and adobe clay. We have several of these all across this site, and these, again, these structures came up much higher. They were made of adobe clay. They would be covered up on top. They're separated, and this is where you store your corn. Fremonts were hunter-gatherers. Originally, they were just hunter-gatherers, but eventually they started to get corn from their Puebloan neighbors. And that corn gave them a chance to be a little more permanent. And this structure reeks of being permanent. These are people who are trying to settle and live in one place and not be on the move so much. So undoubtedly in these areas, they were planting corn, and they grew enough corn that there's like 5 or 6 of these double granaries on this site that would have been about this tall and been filled with dried corn. Having dried corn is incredible because then you can have it year round. You just dry it out, you go and you take some off the surface and you grind it up on a mano and a metate, you make cornmeal and you can cook yourself up some food. So even in the dead of winter, you still have nutritious food, even if you're not able to find anything to hunt. The really unique thing about this site is it's so cosmopolitan and diverse in the types of structures. There's enormous pit houses that were right here that again are very standard for Fremont people. But there's also, again, this big old square room, these super tall types of granaries. But there was also, just over here, there was kind of like a type of shade made up. There was all these posts, and there was sort of like a overlook area with a bunch of boards over the top to provide shade. And even though we know that this area used to have more trees and more lush, fertile plants around here, they're not here now, but still, even in the summer, it's still gonna get hot even back then. So having a nice shady area to work under, it's great. You know, if you're going to have kind of community mentality, you're gonna be able to grind corn together. You're gonna be able to weave baskets together. There's an area in shade where people could sit. That was right over here. And again, now you look at this site and there's not much here that's viewable on the surface. And so that's what's so good that we have these archaeological records of the dig site so we can interpret this site accurately. And we can understand that, again, a couple hundred people were living here. There's a whole little community, whole little village right here. And what just blows my mind is how much has changed. The fact that nobody could live here now. There's nothing. But yet, if you go a few miles up on the mountain, suddenly it becomes fertile again. This is a foundation of one of the large pit houses. And again, it's amazing. 700 years ago, people lived in this, and then it all got buried up. Archaeologists re-excavated it, reburied it, and now it just looks like an impression. But again, kind of what is done these days is archaeologists will rebury a site and even rebury it with artifacts inside so that it can last, because whatever conditions are here that preserved it and kept it from being destroyed, those same climatic conditions are still here. It's still dry, it still gets very little rain. Burying it up in this dry sediment will still help preserve it.
We're going to leave this desolate site. This was once vibrant and full of life, and in the past 700 years it has changed so much. We turn upward now to the west to Wheeler Peak. We're going to drive up and take our crew up there, and we're going to visit the actual caves where the people from this village would go up to the mountains to hunt, and they would bring back their kills down to the site we are now leaving. Hope you enjoy seeing this other archaeological site.
Now we're up here, much higher in elevation, maybe as much as 800 to 1,000 feet higher than we were just out at the Baker Archeological site. And in this area, we have a wonderful flowing river right next to us, and we're surrounded by trees. There's aspen trees, there's river birch, there's very useful trees like juniper trees, which juniper is woven into many things like baskets and mats for sleeping on, even clothing if need be. And there is ponderosa pines, which are really good for making staves, for making ladders, and also for your holding up your structures. But we also have pinyon pines everywhere, all around here, which is where we get our pine nuts. And pine nuts are a very important source of protein to the ancient people here. Now, we are at a cave. We don't necessarily believe that people lived in this cave, but we believe the people at the Baker site would come up to the mountains to hunt, things like deer and bighorn sheep. And this was a place to stay and a place to camp, not a place to be inhabited. They lived down below. Now, this site, I would love to go into this cave, but we cannot. There's signs posted everywhere saying not to enter in. And we asked permission to go in this cave like 9 months ago. And we went through all the levels of approval. And then finally they said, we have to get approval of every tribe that currently in historic times claims this is their ancestral lands. And we worked through that process and we're not able to get all of the tribes to approve us to film inside the cave on time. So if you ever come to these caves, the Park Service is not going to tell you where they are. But if you know where they are, there's signs that say don't go in. Don't go in, not only because you're not supposed to and you're supposed to be respectful, but there's also hidden cameras. So if you think you're going to go in here and vandalize or go tour around, you're going to get caught. So don't do it. That's why we're filming out front. But we want to visit this site because this is a very unique site because, first of all of the surroundings give us a good idea of what the landscape was like down below at the Baker site we just left. It was lush. There were trees, there were plants, there was game. It's hard to envision it now, and that's what's so nice to see this landscape and see what it was like down below. Now that river's dried up, all the plants are dried up, it's totally different. The other really unique thing about this site is there are some beautiful pictographs. Now petroglyphs are chiseled into the rock, pictographs are painted on the rock, and they're painted with earth pigments. So you get like red ochre, and you mix it with hide glue, and you put those things together, and it will last. Earth pigments don't fade. Now they can eventually get washed away, but we're fortunate and we're going to take a look at these because these are some really beautiful and unique pictographs at this site. And again, I wish we could go down to this cave. We're going to go ahead and zoom in as far as we can with the cameras, but we cannot go inside. But it's important to imagine, even when I'm up here right now, it's like 1,000,000 degrees out here, but in this cave, just being in the opening instantly, the people filming are frying, and I'm cooling off right here, just being barely in the shade of this wonderful cave. So if you came up here in the summer, you're gonna go hunt some mule deer, some turkey that were up here, you can get up to this elevation, you can camp out here, you can get your kill, and then you can take it with you back down to go back to the Baker village where we just came from. Now this whole region has many caves, and the most famous cave is Lehman Cave, which you can actually go and you can go on tours with a ranger and you can see it's a beautiful limestone cave with amazing cave formations. Nobody lived in Lehman Cave. People did stay in this cave. We don't think there was like permanent habitation. We think this was a hunting camp sort of situation. But nobody lived in Lehman Cave. Now, they won't talk to you about this anymore. They used to let you know this, but in Lehman Cave, there were human remains that were found, and it's actually kind of sad. There were two people. There was an adult and a child, and what they think happened was that a child fell in, and then the parent went down in to try to get him, and neither one could get out. So it's kind of sad. We used to be told, if you look at the earlier tours and the earlier literature, they said they were Native American burials, but apparently it looks like that maybe it was sort of a tragic accident, which happens in caves. Nobody lived in Lehman Cave. People did stay in this cave. And any little cave you can have could have been inhabited at least one time, at least somebody passing through. It's a good way to stay out of the cold, a good way to stay from predators, and a good way to reflect that heat back from the fire. So it makes a lot of sense to stay in a cave.
Walking down towards the entrance of this cave, it's interesting to feel kind of the echoes of the past, knowing that for hundreds of years, and maybe thousands of years, hunters would enter this cave and camp here. Out front, there are beautiful pictographs painted. These do not last as well as petroglyphs. These are not carved, they are painted with earth pigments, and they wear out much quicker. These date back to around 700 years old. There's figurative depictions of humans, but if you look on all sides, anywhere you see those streaks of red, those are places that have faded where there were figures painted before. Now we also see pieces and images of people who are paired up. This is very common among the Fremont. We know the Fremont people would make clay pilling figures, males and females put together, wrapped in bundles and hidden in the rocks. We also see them doing a similar thing with their cave paintings, where they would paint a male and a female figure together with red ochre pigment. Some of these images are so faded you can barely see them, but they're recognizable upon closer inspection. Within this whole area is a beautiful riparian corridor. This is again what the Baker Archeological site originally looked like 700 years ago. There's many useful plants in the area, including chokecherries, which you can eat the cherries themselves and use the wood to make arrows and bows. And there's also many wild roses, which are also edible and also wonderful for making very straight, powerful arrows. There's several other caves along this ridge site. Some of them have carbonizing up above, but other than that, they just seem like a quick stop to camp. But as we walk further down the road, we make our way up to the last cave with some very unique cave paintings over the top of the carbonized walls.
Now there's another cave right next to the cave we were just at, and also just like the other cave, there's signs saying you cannot enter. So we're not going to enter this cave. But what's really interesting about this cave, there's tons of carbonizing all over the wall from fires. That's normal. But there are painted pictographs over the top of the carbonized scoring. So what that is a much more recent time period. So the very tail end of these caves being used, these could have been hunting stops since the Ice Age. And you have, hundreds of years, thousands of years of soot building up. But somebody in fairly recent times, like the past 700 years, has painted over the top of the black. That's very rare. You don't usually see that, and it's really beautiful to see. Well, I hope you enjoyed checking out the Baker Archeological site and then seeing these caves that were also inhabited by the same people from that site. It's really interesting when you piece together history and you go to these different sites and you learn about how much the landscape has changed at this time. So, but I hope you will go check out some of these sites yourself. And always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.